Hello everyone and welcome back to my studio. Recently I was inspired by looking at some pretty butterflies landing on flowers and decided to create a drawing from it. So I cut out a mask and adhered it to some drawing paper on my easel, and with my airbrush created the semblance of a blurry background using shades of green acrylic paint. Then I carefully peeled away the mask to reveal the paper below and set to work with some coloured pencils. I added in the details of the butterfly and coneflower so that within just 3 hours I could end up with this piece of artwork. So let me start at the beginning and show you with a little bit more detail. Firstly, I wanted to transfer images quickly and accurately for my mask, and a light panel is a great tool for using to transfer onto thicker paper. I needed slightly thicker paper to withstand any moisture from the airbrush. I carefully traced out my outline with a 6H pencil to get a nice light sketch, and I'm using Strathmore Bristol vellum paper, which is great for coloured pencil application because it's really smooth and works well with blending colours. Instead of Frisket as a mask, I'm using a sticky draw liner that comes on a roll, and this is fantastic because it's completely repositionable, yet you can cut fine lines with it, and I talk about this in more detail in my other video shown in the card above. It's important to create a mirror image so that when I peel away the mask, it's going to cover exactly over my sketch lines. Drawing these in means I won't have to re-sketch everything so that it'll all line up nicely. So I begin cutting the outline with a pair of small, sharp scissors. So once the mask is cut out, I need to place it over my sketch lines on my vellum drawing paper, and this product is easy to work with. I just grab a corner and peel it back, cutting off the excess. And the only thing to remember is to try not to get it stuck to itself. It's repositionable when you're trying to get it lined up so that I can re-stick it if things don't line up exactly the first time round. And then I just lay it down over my sketch, making sure it lies down flat without any folds or ripples. And because it's repositionable, I can lift it to get it exactly where I want it to go, and I press it down to make sure that all the edges are glued securely. Now I'm back at my easel and I have my paper taped to it, and I'm just creating a very quick background with my airbrush. I want the semblance of some blurry trees behind the butterfly and the coneflower, so I'm adding some green acrylic paint to the airbrush. To darken the green, I mix in just a drop, not much more, of black, and I'll be sharing my whole process with airbrushing backgrounds as I've been asked if I'll make a separate video. So anyway, using an old brush, I'm just mixing the colours in thoroughly, and I pull the trigger back, testing on some spare paper to the side, and I get some pigment onto the paper. Acrylic is a fast drying medium, like really fast, so I know I don't have to worry about waiting when I want to add additional colours. So I'm just moving around the paper in circular motions, adding colour quite liberally in layers. And getting these backgrounds in is pretty fast and fairly easy, as it's supposed to be blurry, so I only needed to add a lighter and a darker value to get the look that I wanted. And since it's blurry, and I happen to love the bokeh effect, I want to add some additions of circles. And for these bokeh effects, I'm using a template, having masked off the areas I don't want to use. And then to make things more random being the key element here, I add a few circles in various lighter green shades to achieve some more light to the painting. I can go over acrylic if I don't like the look, as it's completely opaque. And then comes the fun part, removing the mask. It's a little hard to grab the first corner, but it peels off really cleanly to reveal the Strathmore art paper underneath, which is exactly what I wanted. I have to go quite carefully around the petals, so I'm removing it slowly. And you can see that because I used sharp scissors when cutting out the mask, I have lots of really nice edges to work with around the cone flower. And better still, all of my sketch lines are still there from before, which is perfect. Because all the little details are in there that I drew earlier with the graphite pencil, I'm now ready to bring this image to life with some colour. I'm using Faber-Castell Polychromos coloured pencils, but you can use any wax or oil-based pencils. As long as your pencils are blendable, you can use any brand you prefer. I use both inexpensive and expensive brands with great results, so just use what you have. And I like to sharpen my pencils with this General's pencil sharpener. And zooming in now, I wanted to show you that the surface is nice and flat all around because the airbrush just lets out a little spray of paint, so there are no ridges at all and everything has dried matte, which is great to match the coloured pencil application. I'm now ready to add in all the markings of the butterfly to begin establishing the main outlines. I made sure my pencil was sharpened to a point and filled in all the areas to make them really stand out. When beginning with coloured pencils, I like to use a limited number of colours, as I know I can always add more later, but it's helpful to keep things simple in the beginning. I always work lightly and in layers. Using good quality paper is critical to get the best results, and in my opinion, this is more important than the coloured pencils. Without good paper, you'll struggle to blend the pigment. This Strathmore vellum paper isn't expensive, and it's really nice to work with because it's so smooth. Strathmore Bristol smooth paper works very well too. I now add the butterfly legs that are sitting on top of the flower, and using 2 shades of green, I can match and blend the background with the acrylic background, because when I cut the mask, these were some difficult to get to areas, so I decided they were too fiddly to cut around. Now, coloured pencil work isn't messy, but when you're working with darker colours, it can possibly smudge, so it's a good idea to shield your hands with something, and I use glassine, but a sheet of paper would work just as well. The antenna is just one fine line with a blob on the end, and the highlight is just another line. I like to bring out the highlight with a white pencil, and I continue with the butterfly markings. But the really interesting part to draw is the coneflower itself. There are some little yellow flowers sitting right on the top, so I've made sure I'm adding those in, and because the coneflower has all of its main shape determined by the mask, it makes the flower a lot easier to draw, as I'm left with some really clean and sharp edges that stand out. Going over acrylic with coloured pencil wouldn't work because coloured pencils are relatively opaque, so having created a mask means that all the colours I'm now applying will really stand out on the white surface, and I don't have to be overly concerned about where all those edges need to begin and end. To determine values within the coneflower, I am adding dark green. The main shapes of these petals are short lines, so at this point I'm just mark making, but as with all nature drawings, it's important I notice the direction I'm going as well as the marks that I lay down, and these marks are going in an outward direction from the centre in a semicircular fashion. Unlike the butterfly, there are many colours placed on top of each other here. I've got light greens, dark greens, and also orange, and eventually at the base of the flower some purples. I knew my coneflower reference I decided to use was a really pale pink, almost white in its petals, so I knew I needed to add a lot more depth in the coneflower part of the flower to draw attention there. And I'm looking at my original reference as I'm working, building layers again with that light pressure. I don't want to burnish the paper too early on by pressing down too hard on the tooth of the paper. And the tooth of the paper is just the part of the paper that's made up of peaks and valleys. It's important to layer the different colours so that there are some nice blended graduations happening here. And as long as I apply light and even layers, I can put colours on top of each other. The most important part of the flower is achieving the look that the individual petals are standing up in a three-dimensional manner. So to get that look, it's important to add lots of contrast into the base of the flower so I can put some much darker greens right in the centre. And I've only used 3 greens within this flower and the background. The colours are less important than the values, so the greens I'm applying here have a light, mid and dark value, which is perfect for adding important vein details to the stem. And similarly with the petals, which are light, I've only used a couple of colours. I want to keep the shape of the petals curved, with more depth coming right off the centre of the flower, which isn't getting any light, and tapering off at the end, creating a little upturned lip just there. And I make sure that I separate all of the petals and follow the shape of the petals as they shape around. And finally, I can peel off the masking tape. Masking off well and using the airbrush creates a nice even edge all around. My painting coloured pencil piece is ready for framing and hanging. Please subscribe to my channel if you enjoy my videos. I really appreciate it. See you next time.